The political, social, and cultural divisions in the United States are such that it's pretty clear that there's going to be a civil war in the not too distant future. When I say not too distant future, you know, the next 4 to 8 years. 8 years on the outside. And so it pays to be thinking about it at this time. See? Because, you see, we live in the present, the past is behind us, and the future is coming at us. And so it pays us to know what's coming into the future in order to either take advantage of it or get out of the way of the speeding train coming our way, right? And so if you think that there's going to be a civil war, this video is basically a speculation, a thought experiment, call it what you will, about how this might possibly start. Before I get started on this video, I'd ask you to please check out my Patreon channel. Link is in the description below. On Patreon, I put out an extra video every week, and I do a Sunday call-in show called the Weekly Webinar. And so far, I have over 160 videos there that you'll find nowhere else. So please check it out. Like I said, link is in the description below. And so anyway, let's get started. You see, what is a civil war? A civil war is when in a country, a single political unit, there is a division between two factions that not only is it that the two factions are at odds with one another, but that both factions or one of the two factions feels that only by way of military force can they become successful. In a normal, stable society, there might be two factions or more, but in a stable society, there's the knowledge or the sense or the belief that in some sort of compromise or accommodation, both sides can live together. But a civil war, well, that's the end of that. That's a feeling that, you know, we can't live with one another, let's get divorced. But of course, a nation can't divorce itself, and so it goes to war, to civil war. Now, the key issue in any civil war is that the military has to be divided. The military has to be split. It doesn't matter if it's equally or one side is bigger than the other. That's not the point. The point is that, see, a non-trivial portion of the military has to believe that the government in power is wrong. And they are willing to take up arms against that government in power. Now, that's the definition of a civil war. If the military is completely cohesive and is not divided in any way, then there's no civil war. In Chile in 1973, there was a coup d'etat against the communist government of Salvador Allende. And he was a communist. Don't tell me he was a socialist. I know what I'm talking about, and I know Chilean history. And I know the policies that Salvador Allende implemented between 1970 and 1973 much better than you do, commie, saying that he's a socialist. And I'm here to tell you that Salvador Allende was a communist. And the military was egged on by everybody else. The whole country wanted Salvador Allende gone. And they finally, in 1973, in September of 73, staged a coup d'etat and overthrew the communist government. And what's key is that the Chilean military was never split. Even though the communists under Salvador Allende tried to split it, they actually sided against nationalist officers before the coup d'etat, of course. They pushed for and raised up officers, admirals, generals who were known to be sympathetic to the left. But when the coup happened, what happened was that the majority of the officer corps in Chile knew exactly who the leftist officers were. And they separated them, just totally isolated them. They didn't do anything to them particularly, except in a couple of cases where just the guy was just too much of a communist, right? But anyway, just separated them from the armed forces. And so the Chilean military was unified, and hence there was no civil war in Chile. But in other countries where there's been a communist takeover, I think the Soviet Union, think China, think just every other place, right? Nicaragua, whatnot. See, the military was not cohesive. It was not unified in one particular position. And this led to a civil war, okay? In fact, you look at history, in most of the communist takeovers, there is a civil war shortly thereafter. And that matters because in the United States, as of January 20th, 2021, the communists have taken over. And they are going to implement a whole host of communist measures. And these communist measures, it seems very obvious to me, are going to lead to the civil war. Now, what are those steps? Well, see, the first step, or it's going to be a series of steps, is just more and more abuse against the communists' perceived enemies. Now, in the United States, that's basically the alt-right, the populists, the nationalists. Let's call them nationalists, just to make it easy. The pro-Trumpers, the people who are against the woke ideology, irrespective of whether these people who are anti-woke are on the left, center, or the right. The communists, the wokesters who are in power, they understand that anybody who's anti-woke, anti-critical race theory, anti-racial divisiveness, no matter how far to the left they might happen to be, well, all of those people are the enemy. Anybody who's against wokesterism is against the communist government that is taking over in the United States. Okay? Now, those people who are against wokesters might not realize this, but the wokesters do. And the wokesters in the American government over the next 18 months, 24 months, 30 months, they are going to implement a whole series of measures that are deliberately aimed at these anti-wokesters, these nationalists, these people who are in favor of the traditional American republic. And they are going to abuse people in a way that's going to be just unprecedented. And this abuse will continue and it will escalate until we have a tipping point. That tipping point will be when a major national politician of some sort will, because of pressure from his own constituency, will rise up and say, no, 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 I am totally against these measures, and these measures are anti-American. These measures are abusive. Okay? That's going to be the key moment. At the time that it happens, it will seem a little bit trivial, or the mainstream media, which is basically the propaganda arm of the American communists, will downplay it and belittle this politician, whosoever he might happen to be, who is standing up to the wokesters, to the American communists. They're going to belittle him, they're going to crap all over him, just abuse him. But this guy will become like the focus of resistance to the American communists because of his standing up. And I don't have much faith in the American politicians, and I've said before in other videos that I think that they're all, just betas and psychopaths. I did a video about it, and you can find it right here. But the point, this politician will be under such pressure from his constituency, such pressure from the people who put him in office, pressure because of the abuse that the American communist government is going to be inflicting on the people, that this politician will stand up. And he will be a politician such that he has the credibility. There are lots of politicians who might be nationalists, but they don't have much credibility. Because at this time, there's a sense that they might be either fools or grifters of some sort who are just playing political advantage. I'm thinking specifically of that Senator Hawley from Missouri, I believe, who seems a little bit off his rocker, and Ted Cruz from Texas, who seems just slimy and opportunistic. See? Those guys, I'm not talking about those guys, no. It's going to be somebody who's got a sterling reputation, a guy who's considered reasonable, a guy who's considered, level-headed, normal, on the level, right? That guy, he is going to be in a position such, either morally, which I don't think is very likely, or more properly, because of such pressure from his constituents, that he will have to stand up. And that will be a key moment. It won't be a key moment because the guy can do anything. No. It'll be a key moment because people will start to coalesce around him. Coalesce around him, and they will be able to start to articulate the fact that they are under such abuse. Because right now there are a lot of people in the United States who recognize the abuse of the left. I mean, the BLM riots, for instance, that were allowed to pass scot-free. A lot of those small business people, they're furious about it, and they have been able to articulate their grievances very well on social media, but that has been sort of like muffled, and it's been sporadic, it's been here and there. No, I'm talking about the fact that the American communists will so antagonize the people that it'll be like a generalized rumbling among a significant portion of the population, not all of the population, okay? Certainly not among the wokesters in the elite and the lower classes. No, it'll be a rumbling in the middle, a rumbling in a sense that we are going in the wrong direction and these communists are out to get us. But that won't be the trigger for the Civil War. Look at history. Look at all the civil wars that have happened in the past. In the United States, there were 2 civil wars. People always think of the one in the 19th century as the Civil War. But if you think about it, the Revolutionary War was a civil war. Yeah, because, who were the rebels? They were Britons. They were fighting against the British Empire, which was their empire. It wasn't later after the fact, post hoc, they called it a revolutionary war, decolonization or whatever. But at the time, it was much more of a civil war. Washington was an officer in the British Army, a very successful and highly decorated officer in the British Army. And he was the one who led the quote-unquote revolution. What was that? A civil war. That's what happened, okay? The army in the United States, in the British colonies in America, the local army cleaved from the main British army and started fighting against them. That's what happened in the Revolutionary War. It was a civil war, right? And it's a much more common type of civil war, like messy, with no clear territorial divisions, unlike the 19th century Civil War. But anyway, going back to the issue of civil wars in general. What happens? How is it that the military breaks apart? How is it that the military becomes 2? Because a military, all of the officers, all of the soldiers are trained relentlessly to be a cohesive unit. That's the whole point of an army. So for an army to split off, to break away into 2 or more factions, right? It has to be pretty heavy. It's not just some, little hissy fit or something trivial. No. And what is it? It's very simple. You look at history and you look at every civil war, and the point of cleavage in the army is when the army is ordered to fire on its own citizens. That's the start of the Civil War. That's the moment. See? And that is going to happen in the United States. There is going to be an incident at some point where the American communist government will have pressured the people and abused them and been despicable for so long that eventually some demonstration, something will happen. Some event will happen. And in and of itself, it might seem trivial, but what will happen is that, American troops will be deployed to maintain security, safety, to keep the streets safe, as they're doing in Washington, for instance. And what will happen is that, the soldiers will be deployed, and they will be under the command of some, lieutenant colonel or major or whoever, right? And that officer is going to be on the ground with his soldiers. And the American Communist government will tell the Joint Chiefs of Staff to order that commanding officer on the ground to fire on American citizens. That will be the moment, because one of 2 things is going to happen. Either that lieutenant colonel or major, or whoever's in charge, right? He is going to either carry out that order or refuse to do so. Now, if he carries out the order and shoots American citizens, this will be catastrophic for the American military. Because what will happen is that there will be a substantial portion of the American military, irrespective of their politics, that constitutionally, like morally, like in their blood and bones, they will not be able to stomach that. They will say, yeah, maybe these people were insurrectionists, quote unquote. They were alt-right Nazis. Yeah, but they're Americans. We can't, as an army, be killing American citizens in America. We can't be doing that. There will be a substantial number of officers, and certainly non-commissioned officers and soldiers, who will say, no, that is unacceptable. And there will be a substantial portion of officers and non-commissioned officers and soldiers who will say, well, the government ordered, so they must be right, and we have to maintain order. We have to do what the government says. That's the moment. That's the moment when the American military will cleave. And from there, it will be only a matter of time before those 2 factions in the American military start to fight one another. Because you see, if an army is in disagreement with each other internally, if an army, the officer corps, a substantial portion say that certain orders are immoral and unjustified, and the others say, well, no, that's what the civilian authorities say, and they say go and shoot these people, so we go and shoot these people. That's it. That's curtains. See? Because in the hypothetical, I said there were two possibilities, of course. That number one, that the commanding officer on the ground shot the protesters or the insurrectionists or the alt-right Nazis or whatever they're going to be called, right? The one possibility is that they shoot them. The other possibility is that he refuses to carry out those orders, right? Well, if he refuses to carry out those orders, then that officer, lieutenant colonel or major or whomever, he'll be instantly cashiered and thrown into a stockade, and that'll be that, right? But then there'll be another incident identical to that one. And so that man's career will be destroyed, yes, but he will simply have postponed that day of cleavage, that day of breaking the military into two factions. One willing to shoot American citizens and the other unwilling to shoot American citizens. Now, why am I sure that this is pretty much going to happen? Well, because I know leftists, and leftists, like I said before, they know what to do with power, number one. They use it. Once they have power, they go ahead and use it because they recognize that power is not a depreciating asset. Rather, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you have it. It's not like gasoline in a car. And so because of it, leftists are more than willing to use their power. And because they are more willing to overdo it, to overstep their bounds. See? And so because of that, they're going to push and push and push and abuse people who disagree with them. And we're already seeing it. I mean, what are we pretending otherwise? We see the American communists in big tech and the financial sector now, that they are deplatforming people, curtailing services to people, unpersoning people. Yeah, we're seeing it. Yeah, and it's only going to get worse. See, it's like cannibals. Once they get a taste of man flesh, they enjoy it and they want more. Yeah, read Lord of the Rings, for crying out loud. But anyway, the point: these people, these leftists, they don't know when to quit. And more to the point, they will have no problem ordering the military to shoot American civilians whom they consider unpersons. See? The moment that the left in the United States said that it was okay to punch a Nazi, that was the moment of the beginning of the slippery slope. The slippery slope that goes straight to the end, which is kill everybody who opposes us, because they are all Nazis. These communists who are in control of the American government, who are taking over on January 20th, they don't know when to stop, and they look at all of their opposition as Nazis who deserve a punch in the face, a bullet between the eyes. They believe that. They believe that anybody who opposes them is an unperson who doesn't deserve to live. They say it all the time on Twitter, man. I mean, when somebody says something, take them at their word, okay? When they say that they hate somebody enough that they want to eliminate them, believe them, okay? That's what they're going to do. And so, the point of this video, you have to be looking for two moments. The moment when some mainstream, fairly respectable politician stands up and says, no, this is outrageous, number one. And the moment when the military shoots on American citizens. By the way, this happened, huh? This happened. Yeah, the Boston Massacre. What the hell do you think that was? What, the Redcoats shot on Americans? No, the Redcoats shot on British citizens. Yeah. Because those people in Boston in 1774, whenever it was, they were British subjects. And that army was the British Army. And that was the moment when the British Army in the American colonies split. And George Washington, who was, I'm not sure if he was the most senior officer who split off, but certainly, one of the most respected, if not the most respected. He became the de facto commander-in-chief of the American Revolutionary Forces, see? And you look at other countries that have experienced civil wars, it's pretty much the same story every time. The military starts shooting on the citizens, on the orders of a government that a substantial portion of the people think is not only wrong, but illegitimate. And that government, in order to shore up its legitimacy, resorts to force. The American Communist government of the Biden-Harris group, they recognize that there is a substantial portion of the population, potentially more than 50%, that believe that they are illegitimate. And so they are going to resort to force. Yeah. I mean, look, this is a really interesting thought experiment, right? And you don't have to believe me. But it's something to think about. And if you look at history, see, Mark Twain said something very smart. He said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. Every single civil war in the past shares so many features with what the United States is experiencing now, in the lead up to the Civil War. And it was always the same. A divided body politic, a new government that a substantial portion of the population thought was illegitimate, not just wrong, not just of the opposing party, but illegitimate. This new government abusing its political opponents to the point that those political opponents just found it intolerable and they started standing up. And eventually, that new government, perceived as illegitimate, started shooting its enemies, i.e. its fellow citizens. And that's when all hell broke loose. That has happened every time. The United States claims, or a lot of people in the United States claim, that the United States is exceptional. It might be exceptional in many ways, but it's not that fucking exceptional. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said earlier, please check out my Patreon channel. Link is in the description below. I talk about a lot of subjects that, frankly, on YouTube I can't talk about because I'd be deplatformed. Yeah, go check it out before I'm gone, because I'm likely going to be gone, deplatformed from YouTube soon. So go check it out. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you next time.